Carson Brown is a integrative psychiatrist in private practice in the Twin Cities. And she moved to Minnesota from the San Francisco Bay Area in 2021, partially due to climate change, which I'm sure she'll share with us about. She has presented on clinical approaches to climate distress at the American Psychiatric Association, Midwest Climate Summit, and Minnesota Psychiatric Society, and many local environmental organizations and mental health providers. Dr. Brown uses the Work That Reconnects, developed by Joanna Macy, as a framework for addressing eco-anxiety and focuses on interactions between systems of oppression, climate change, and mental health. So welcome, Dr. Brown. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy I got to hear the beginning of this because I get to see a little bit of what you're all up to and just really want to thank you for your work and just the courage it takes to really engage in climate is just really moves me. So thank you so much for having me. I know you also had a mental health theme talk last month, so thank you for being a group that acknowledges the psychological part and I'm hoping that the presentation can be practical for folks. I'm also hoping it can feel conversational. I think, the wisdom is in the collective. I'm not trying to just impose anything on folks. So I know we'll have time for Q&A and everything at the end, but I would say if something's really relevant to feel free to put something in the chat in the moment, and we'll try to keep an eye on that to just make it a little more interactive and conversational. And people should feel free to call me Carson by my first name too. So now I will attempt to share and get myself set here. Okay, and let me just get this full screen. Okay. Great. So we're going to talk about sustaining mental health amid the climate crisis. We talk about everything being sustainable and our psyches need to be included in that. And there are a lot of beautiful images in this presentation. They're all by Hilary Fail, who is just a beautiful kind of eco-oriented artist who I really love. Okay, here we go. Yes, I am going to talk about moving from the Bay Area because this is San Francisco on what we called Orange Day, which was September 9th, 2020. This is a photo from midday, and it looks like this because of the wildfire smoke. So, September 2020, we were smack in the middle of COVID. The 2020 election was approaching, and it was the worst wildfire year by far that I had ever experienced, living there for over 30 years. So this was kind of a day that tipped me a little bit of thinking it might be time to go. This is the Bay Bridge looking from San Francisco towards the East Bay. And the quote I've superimposed here is from a 2022 study where they looked at the psychological impacts on, they call it environmental workers. So that was a pretty broad category of volunteers and people working professionally in any environmental or climate related work. And this study really demonstrated that workers were really feeling the effects of trauma, grief, and stress. And it called for there to be more interventions in this area. The thing was, even in 2022, just a few years ago, we didn't really know what those should be. Like, it was clearly a need and clearly a good idea, but developing the actual clinical approaches is quite new. It's a new field. It's a collage of headlines. These are all from the last couple years. One of these says, 10 years ago, people weren't really talking about eco-anxiety or climate distress. It was kind of written off. But I would say definitely in the last few years, you're just hearing more and more about, especially in youth, but really in everybody, that when we're facing these really deep existential threats, it's kind of common sense that there's going to be psychological impacts of really considering that the whole underpinning of our existence is threatened. This was a really important study that came out recently. It was in The Lancet. It's Lewandowski and its co-authors from 2024. This is just one of the figures. So the study was a really big online survey. It was almost 16,000 people, youth ages 16 to 25. And you just see, these top five, how does climate change make you feel? Anxious, powerless, afraid, sad, angry. That's two-thirds of people in the study were endorsing those emotions. And then lots more here, grief, depression, guilt, and only a small percentage at the bottom feeling optimistic. So obviously, these types of emotions are very much the realm of psychiatry and psychology, and it just really catches all of our attention of like if we're going to be addressing psychic distress, that specific climate related distress is 100% going to be part of that. And then I love this about your group too. What I've seen of how you all think is that we can't really discuss climate without discussing justice. And the mental health impacts are the same as all the other impacts of climate change, that we know that it's disproportionately going to impact people who are marginalized by the mainstream oppressive systems. So it's been pretty clearly established that climate change is driven by these extractive systems like capitalism, and that anyone who is othered by these systems are going to just have even more. It's often focused on the like logistical or physical impacts in terms of flooding and housing and different things like that. But we're also seeing from various recent reports that the mental health impacts are also multiplied for people in these populations. So I'm just going to pause here for a second because as I have been taking in all this information really over like the last 8-ish years, I've just been like, okay, this is part of my job to look at this and know what to do. It was starting to show up in my consulting room. People were talking about not being able to plan for the future. People were really talking about a lot of guilt about their carbon footprint and almost like obsessive type behaviors around thinking about purchases or thinking about food or about travel. It, as you all know, it like mental health touches every aspect of life and climate touches every aspect of life. So I was really starting to hear this stuff from my patients. And I was just no one talked about this in residency training. No one was talking about it in general. And I was just casting about like, what are we doing? How are we going to respond? And that was when I first ran across the Work That Reconnects and the work of Joanna Macy. I was still living in the Bay Area, and Joanna was from Berkeley. She died last year. She was in her 90s and still very active in all of this work, to the end, really. She came up through the anti-nuclear movement in like the late 70s and mainly in the 80s. So she was very much an OG environmental activist. She's also a devoted Buddhist, so brings a lot of spiritual elements into the work. She studied systems theory, so just very attuned to interconnections and how systems work, and comes from a deep ecology kind of background also. And what always has struck me about her is you'll notice in that list of what she does, none of them are related to mental health. She's not a psychologist, she's not, formally trained in mental health, but she still came to a lot of the same conclusions that we come to from just another discipline. I guess a lot of these truths are just so fundamental that it doesn't really matter what the entry point is. We all kind of end up in similar places. So, it's a little bit hard, especially in a brief time, to describe what the Work That Reconnects is. If you're curious, really, if I have one takeaway from this talk, it would be to check out the book Active Hope. I don't know if anyone has, I usually ask if people have heard of Joanna Macy or this book before. But the Work That Reconnects is a really broad collection of different activities that she really developed at group workshops over many decades. There are lots of like exercises and sort of structured conversations and different rituals and storytelling, that Julie was mentioning earlier, that her whole goal is to allow people to access their climate emotions, which are often kind of suppressed or denied because they feel like they're going to be too overwhelming. So give people sort of a safe structure to even be able to tap into the feelings initially. And then to make sure that they don't just get stuck there, because I think that's very much a fear. If I open to the enormity of these feelings, are they going to overwhelm me? And is that just where I'm going to live now in this really, really deep despair? So she wants to evoke, contain, and then channel the emotions that come along with climate distress. So like I said, it's a very complex system, and I sort of in these brief talks focus on this one structure within the Work That Reconnects, which is a four-stage spiral, and it's a process that just kind of keeps reiterating. The beginning is grounding in gratitude, and I'm going to go into each of these. Each of these parts will have their own slides, so we'll go into some more detail. But the overview is after grounding in gratitude, we move into honoring our pain for the world, which sort of naturally unfolds into these new perspectives of seeing with new eyes, at which point we're sort of ready to go forth and do something with those new insights. And then we kind of start back at the beginning, spiral back to gratitude. So starting with gratitude, sometimes I'm guilty of thinking gratitude is kind of a platitude or something like that Instagram's telling you to do. But really, I remind myself sometimes by looking at this white paper from the Greater Good Science Center based at Berkeley, that gratitude has a serious basis in being one of the best things we can do to shore ourselves up psychologically. Joanna calls it that gratitude gives us some psychological buoyancy. And she's very much not using it in a Pollyanna type of way to like bypass. Um, the Work That Reconnects is absolutely not about bypassing. It's trying to give us, to shore us up enough that we can be fortified and prepared to really face the pain of the realities. She also really highlights it as, a lot of people are motivated to get involved with climate activism from out of guilt, out of fear, these kind of, I don't like using the word negative and positive, but these more sort of distress-based motivations. And she thinks gratitude can just be a really more buoyant alternative to those to move people into action. At the end, I just note a really brief practice. She has a lot of these that are called open sentences, where she just sort of, it's a prompt where she just gives a lead into a sentence and encourages people to finish them. And I've facilitated this a lot of times, just have people in pairs or in groups of three, just talk about a place that's special to them. And it's so simple, and it really always amazes me how deep it is for people, and just what a lovely thing it is to share and feel the actual like physical sensation of gratitude when you think of somewhere that you really cherish. This was another one that we did as a gratitude practice recently during the ice occupation in January and February. I was working with a local environmental group, and we just did, even with everything going on, I feel grateful for. And so many people in that session just talked about feeling so grateful for our local Minnesota community who would come out in these types of masses in the temperatures we were having then. Um, Even with everything going on, just how inspiring and how gratitude prompting an image like this can really be. So then we're already moving into I'm just giving myself a little time check. Gratitude, after we've shored ourselves up and fortified by gratitude, we go into, this is sort of the meat of it, which is honoring our pain for the world. Um, as I mentioned a second ago, I think a huge fear people express to me is like, if I open the Pandora's box of the intensity of the emotions that are there, that it's going to be completely overwhelming and endless. And is that pain, what will even be the use of feeling it besides just feeling terrible? So we use a term in psychiatry and psychology all the time about reframing, taking the same situation and just putting a different frame around it. And she reframes climate distress in a bunch of different, really sophisticated ways. One is just naming that it is normal to feel this way and adaptive. This is why we've evolved to have emotional responses like anxiety, is to alert us to a problem, and there's a problem. So it's considered non-pathological in the field of psychiatry to have climate distress. Um, it's not just normal, it's useful. She also reframes pain as evidence of interconnection and caring. We wouldn't feel pain for people in Gaza, or we wouldn't feel pain for species going extinct in places that we've never been, unless we were part of this very beautiful and sophisticated, interconnected web of the whole planet. And also just it shows that you care. Um, this next bullet point, that pain is actually a source of information, she really comes from her systems theorist hat with this one, that when we're pushing away the emotions, we're also pushing away information. We're missing out on important feedback from the system that contains wisdom that we need to really inform our next steps. She not just says, but witnesses, and I've seen this happen too, is that when people are willing to open up to the painful emotions, they actually discover that they drive creativity. And simply being willing to feel these things is in itself a disruptor of the status quo, that kind of the powers that be, the status quo wants us all just sort of numbed out and shopping and working and being productive. But when we pause and say, like, wait a second, like I'm really feeling something, that is sand in the gears of these systems that are perpetuating the problem. So I find this list very powerful and important. I kind of revisit it a lot. And this next slide shows some images. There's a specific ritual in the Work That Reconnects called the Truth Mandala that uses objects to represent emotions. And the objects represent fear, grief, anger, and like numbness or hopelessness. But part of the ritual is to emphasize that each of these emotions isn't canceled out by, but coexists with and kind of sits side by side with its opposite. That fear contains courage. We're courageous to even face these fears and do things that are fear inducing. She says repeatedly, we only grieve for things that we love. She sees anger as an expression of passion for justice. And even that like empty or hopeless feeling can be a vacuum where something new comes in and can represent possibility. It can contain this like potential. That's the word I actually like to use for it. So the ritual does it in a very nuanced way. This is a little oversimplified, but I still think it's a powerful reminder that whenever I'm feeling some of these really heavy emotions, to just remember that it contains these other seeds. So after we have endured feeling our pain for the world, she really observes, and I've now seen this happen enough times that I really trust it and believe it too, that it seems to very naturally flow into the third phase of the spiral, which is seeing with new eyes. This quote, as we allow the pain of the world to flow in, it rearranges our internal structures. And in some of my longer talks, especially to psychiatrists, I have a slide about how that actually plays out in lots of like neuroimaging and lots of sort of more advanced neurological studies, that when people have strong emotion, that it does start to light up these more high level problem solving areas of the brain. So I just kind of like to nerd out on that stuff. And yeah, she just reiterates that from doing hundreds of these workshops, she would just see over and over that as people allow themselves to have these emotional experiences, rather than the fear that they're going to get mired in it, stuck in it, never escape it, they actually feel lighter and have sort of more energy to put into action. Yeah, this phase, after people have this strong emotional experience, it's really seeing with new eyes is a lot about really novel ideas. Or people, I hear this all the time. People say like, I've never thought of it this way before, or like, I've been looking at this problem like for years, and it's like I'm seeing it from a different side now. I almost want to like collect quotes around that because it's remarkable. And then after we see with new eyes, part of it is that the path forward gets illuminated. And that's not necessarily the whole path. It may just be a next step. But this whole process of the Work That Reconnects is really trying to clarify a positive vision, something that an individual or a group wants, and then seeing just not what are the next 10 steps, just what is a small step in that direction that I can take from where I'm standing. And I'm saying this is exactly what your group does. That's what I saw you just do 15 minutes ago. So you're all going forth every time you're tabling at one of these festivals, every time you're signing a petition, you're going forth. And I've maybe already sort of said the point in this quote, but just that it's not a matter of waiting for a whole the whole blueprint to show up or knowing that we're going to succeed. It's just trying something out. And even if it doesn't work, we can gain information from that and kind of just go back to the beginning of the spiral. So I've these benefits of work that reconnects, there are some papers out there and studies of the work that reconnects. These that I'm highlighting are ones just that I've seen firsthand, working with patients, but then just also being part of a lot of work that reconnects groups and doing this over and over. Um, it's just, it seems so simple, but just the normalization of these types of emotions, just if that's all I do for people, it surprises me how helpful it is because it's sometimes taboo to kind of like be a downer or talk about these kinds of emotions. And it's so relieving to people to just have it spoken, have it acknowledged, and break the silence. They feel less alone. And a lot of fears of like, if I think this way, maybe I'm going crazy or I'm going to lose it, people feel reassured. Um, this second bullet point, really what I see the most is it increases people's energy because anxiety is an energy hog. It like siphons off all this energy that we want to be using for our passions and our interests. And it's kind of sapping us and robbing us of energy. So as that anxiety can sort of be taken up and transmuted, I see people just have like a second, third wind. It's sort of the opposite of burnout. This third point is a little meta, but I really see the work that reconnects. It decreases fear of the fear. And we see this in psychological topics all the time. There's an emotion, and then there's an emotion about the emotion. I'm depressed, and then I feel ashamed that I'm depressed. And that second layer just is so taxing. And so people feel fear about climate change, but then they're scared of their own fear. And that it's essentially going to overtake them. And what I see from the work that reconnects is people are like, oh, the fear isn't what I'm scared of is scary, but the fear that inside of me itself isn't that scary. It's manageable. I can dip into it and then move through it, go on with my day. Um, there are ways I can channel it and not be overcome by it. And like many psychological interventions, the work that reconnects doesn't necessarily change the exact circumstance that we're in, but it changes how people carry it. And that makes all the difference. I should mention community too. I mean, I use work that reconnects techniques with people in individual therapy, but it's essentially developed as a group process. And the group itself, the community connections from this work, is a huge part of it. Wanted to just leave people with a few resources. The book that I mentioned at the beginning is right up at the top there. That's sort of the original book. There's also the co-author Chris Johnstone has this free self-guided course. I know some people who have read the book and done the course together. I know some workplaces that have done that. I sometimes facilitate active hope reading groups for different organizations. Um, I'm just on the Active Hope soapbox. The Work That Reconnects Network has a great website with a ton of stuff on there that you can learn about. We do have a local Twin Cities Work That Reconnects. If you get really into this and want to join us, we meet monthly and do Work That Reconnects experiential exercises. We don't just talk about it; we do it. And then, yeah, this woman Kathleen Rude is one of the goes way back with Joanna. She is, I think she lives in Chicagoland. So she's local here in the Midwest. This is a really beautiful guided meditation that she put together. And then climate cafes, I don't know if people have heard of them. They're distinct from the work that reconnects, but a lot of people I know in the mental health world actually facilitate climate cafes, which I think of as sort of hand in hand with work that reconnects and have really similar goals. So there are tons of them, tons online, and then some locally that you can attend also. Yeah. Okay. So we're at the end, and I did want to thank everyone for having me. And I mentioned at the beginning, but thank you for the work you do. And I really would encourage people to be in touch with me about this or really just anything climate and mental health related. I think the more conversations we have about it, the better. And I just love hearing as many perspectives as I can. So I'd love to, we'll have a conversation now. But if there's going to be any extended conversations, I welcome that. Well, stop that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I ran a little. I wanted to stop at 7:40, but we still
Oh,
have
no,
time
that's
to
totally
chat.
fine.
Okay.
That was super interesting. And looks like Michael has a question.
Well, Dr. Brown, thank you. That was really, really interesting. And I, towards the end there, I was struck by the fear of the fear, and it made me think. I tried to engage my own family doctor in climate action at one point in time, and he told me, I it upsets me so much that I can't do it. I can't. I really can't get involved with it because it'll overwhelm me. And I know for me, talking with other people and trying to get them engaged and trying to get them to act is it's what my goal is in many instances, and it's really frustrating because so many people just can't can't make the commitment to do it. But I was struck by the fear of the fear line because it made me think of FDR's speech, "All we have to fear is fear itself," when he was first inaugurated, and the crisis in America that was and around the world that he was trying to address at that moment. And I wish there was something that could emulate what he did to bring a nation that was on its knees around towards a positive action to address that problem. So just an observation, but it was a really, really interesting talk. So thank you tonight.
My pleasure. Yeah, thanks for that link. You're absolutely right. It echoes his quote.
Julie?
I just wanted to share that. Thank you so much, Carson. That was really good. And when you were speaking of that, were asking, I think, people, what is their sort of special place with the students group that I talked about earlier? We asked them to think about a place in nature that they connect with, this ninth grade group, um, and we used the strategy to pick a few to share, and then so many did. But some of the stories were just so poignant to me. I mean, these kids were sharing, everything from I love to go to a park to exercise and just decompress, after a long day. One young woman shared, I love my backyard because that's where family gathers and we have celebration. And young woman shared that from my balcony, I can see trees, and it just makes you realize that not everybody has the luxury of a lovely backyard or a big piece of property, but just that you can see trees and be outside in your little way. It was really wonderful. So thank you.
I just wanted to dovetail on both of those things. Julie, what you were just talking about just now, my brother who lives in Dallas visited a long time ago, and we just walked over to Minnehaha Falls, and he said, I'd have to drive 200 miles to see anything this beautiful. And it brings home the other thing I was thinking about, the comment about FDR, which came to my mind as well. And I think the people's fears and anxiety are both causing what we have in power now is kind of the opposite of FDR in a sense regarding climate and all other things. And so people's anxiety, it has always struck me that people's anxiety about existential problems we are facing both caused that political denialism. You know what I mean? That's not a word. Anyway, they're in denial and they want to find someone who's in denial to lead them. And so but that's also causing more anxiety because we're going exactly in 180 degrees away from where we should be going right now. And so we have anti-leadership on the problem, and that's compounding that. So there's a lot to unpack here in a way. Like, yeah, thank you for this really thought-provoking presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. It is very important that how psychology of this developed world should be changed, because if there is you don't need economic revolution, that is already there, but the economic problem is only distribution problem. But
Yes.
you need the psychological revolution now, because right now there are so many meetings, so many discussions, so many get together. But what happens? Because when you majority elect the leader, and they don't totally ignore the climate action. I mean, we are also a part of ecology, right?
Yes.
Humans, we are also a part of an ecosystem, but that we already forgot way back. Right now, we don't have that kind of thing. If that was there, then at least there should be some leader that they may be advocating for the climate. Virtually, it is none. Whether you talk about state or federal, whatever you call, but there is no one that advocate for the climate strongly. But sometimes I have written one article that in the name of climate, we are indulging that agenda, but we haven't bringing any impact there. And what one of the thing is to make a connection is like we promote urban farming in Minnesota, like that. At least that gives some kind of connection. You can play with the soil, you do dig soils, and you can teach the student that small seed of pumpkin that grows so big, and you have a heaps amount of pumpkins in the harvest, and then just one seed. And if you are considering organic, then it's a soil, a seed and the soil that making that wonderful produce. But that kind of message is has to be delivered, and then you should be connected that, like, realize, hey, this is the environment that I am doing. And while doing in your garden, like you can see the bumblebees, bees, butterfly coming there, birds coming there, and then insect there. So you hold the phenomena. You are kind of living in an ecosystem, and you also consider that part of. I'm also the part of this ecosystem. So that kind of realization, if it happens, then there are so many things it heals. Even though that trauma that people are getting with fire, flood, and everything, and you can realize that, okay, I'm also a part of it by connecting to the farm or any kind of environmental activities, and feel that you are also a part of the being or part of the element of the environment. And then that way there are some uh, medium to make connections. I think that is one of the strategies that we should do. But the problem is we talk, and then we go back home, and then we engage in a job, and all these things just forget. And then politics comes, election comes, you vote, majority vote people, and again the same um, opposite leader come there, and then no policy, no change. So
Yeah.
that is the
Thank
reality
you.
here.
Yeah, thank you. Carson, do you want to respond to any of this, or shall we go on
I
for more
think go
comments?
on. I love that it's just a sort of
Yeah.
intra-group conversation. This is great.
Yeah, thank you. All right, well, Tim, on to you.
Yeah, just like to chip in as far as coping. The going forth really resonated with me. When you take any action, if you do something, maybe you get some solar or you get a heat pump. I mean, you feel so good and you get to talk to your neighbors about it, and it works. So that's all.
Yeah, so right to Hobie.
Yeah, I am. I'm older than dirt, and I took my training at Climate Reality in 2016. And at that time, Al Gore had 325 slides in his climate presentation. He now has over 600, I believe. And after he had given the presentation, the next day they asked for feedback, and I looked around and thought, oh gosh, I don't know if I want to stand up. I said, is Al in the room? No, he's on a conference call or something. I said, well, I would say this directly to him anyway. Um, when I looked at the slides, there were 300 of them that said we were all going to die. That the climate crisis was so big and so scary. And maybe 20 of them were, well, here are some potential solutions. And I said, quite frankly, I think the ratio is backwards. Not that we have to be Pollyannish about that, but my experience with fear is that fear is an attention grabber, and we live in a fear-based economy. The more clicks, the more things we hit on, the more dopamine reactions, and the more advertising dollars that we get. And being trained at Climate Reality, or as a nerd, I'm trained as a scientist. We believe in the age of enlightenment and that facts and reasons and logical arguments persuade other people or convince other people. So to connect those two, fear to me, too much fear leads to despair, disengagement, apathy. I've actually had people, as a mentor at Climate Reality, I've had people drop out of the class during Al Gore's talk because it was so depressing, even though I'd warned them up front. And I think it comes from the second thing, is that the idea that the age of reason and the Enlightenment, we believe that if we explain something in enough detail to people, that the scales will fall from their eyes, and all of a sudden they'll say, oh yes, climate change is real. And we're stuck in this loop of trying to convince people that it's real, when in fact, if we just lightened up a little bit and you know did what you're talking about, Tim, which is that even small projects get people feeling different. Hope isn't, I've heard people say we need more hope. I think we need action, and action leads to hope, but it also leads to connection. So that's part of the reason I'll talk about it later. I've yammered on here quite a bit, but part of the reason why I don't give Al Gore's presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, both hope and gratitude, I think, are good for nudging people out of that pit of despair.
Carson, have you seen this?
I
Karen
haven't seen that one.
Okay, I haven't read it. It's in my pile of books that this computer is sitting on. But I heard her speak, and it's climate wayfinding, and it's how you can personally kind of map a direction for yourself. Kind of overlapping, I think, with if I want to read the index and that sort of thing that says, yeah, or the table of contents with stuff that you're talking about tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, everyone's just so thoughtful. Thank you for engaging with the content. I'm just nodding and writing down a lot of what people are saying. I do think, when I give other types of climate presentations, I often say at the beginning, I promise it won't be depressing. Like, because I think, I really do think some climate talks are traumatizing, and that's like really the last thing I want to do. And I take a lot of cues from Work That Reconnects framework to protect people. There's a way to engage this without flooding people.